Those closest to Rob Reiner are drowning in grief and struggling to believe the truth. Just 2 days after the legendary director of When Harry Met Sally and his wife, singer Michelle Reiner, were found dead in their Los Angeles home, all of Hollywood seemed shaken to its core. Billy Crystal, one of Rob's closest lifelong friends, along with several others who were deeply connected to the couple, released a tribute filled with heartbreak and sorrow. Billy's voice trembled as he admitted, "He didn't listen to my warnings." Those words carried an unmistakable pain. When Billy spoke publicly for the first time about Rob and Michelle's passing, it was clear this was not just grief. It was guilt, shock, and the torment of someone who knew, deep down, that something might have been prevented, but ultimately wasn't. Billy has shared that one of the things weighing most heavily on his mind is how many American families are forced to confront addiction. In the past, addiction was often viewed as a moral failing. But here we see the son of a powerful, famous, wealthy man, a devoted father and a mother who gave everything for her children. They did everything they could to save their son. And like countless families across the United States, sometimes the demon called addiction is simply the hardest enemy to defeat. The Brentwood home, once filled with laughter, music, and warmth, is now left with a suffocating silence. For decades, it had been a refuge of love and friendship. But beneath that happiness lay fears and struggles Rob quietly carried. Alone. Billy's decision to open up revealed the emotional burden Rob had borne for years: pressure, sleepless nights, and anxieties he never dared share with the world. According to private recollections shared with trusted reporters, the bond between Rob and Billy ran far deeper than the public ever knew. The fateful meeting took place on a quiet Sunday afternoon, November 30th, 2025, a moment that would later haunt Billy Crystal for the rest of his life. Just 2 weeks before the tragedy, Billy drove to Rob's Brentwood home shortly after 4 p.m., following a brief but serious phone call from Rob himself. Rob's voice on the phone had lost its familiar warmth. He said only one sentence: "I need to talk to you for a bit. Not about movies." No jokes. No laughter. Billy immediately knew something was wrong. When the door opened, that unease deepened. Rob looked nothing like himself. He was exhausted, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes heavy. His handshake was weak, as if all strength had been drained from him. Inside the house, there was no television, no music, something that had never happened before. Rob quietly poured 2 glasses of water, placed one on the table, and never touched it. His eyes kept drifting toward the dark hallway inside the house, unsettling Billy. Finally, Rob spoke, his voice distant. "My family is falling apart. I haven't told anyone this, but I'm completely exhausted." When Billy asked what was really happening, Rob didn't hide it. He spoke about his son, Nick. Nick had relapsed heavily earlier that month. Since then, his personality had changed completely: irritable, quick to anger over trivial things. Some nights, Michelle quietly left the bedroom just to avoid another argument. Rob described a tense confrontation in the kitchen just before Thanksgiving, sparked by money and Nick's treatment. He didn't recount the entire argument, but Billy watched Rob's face change as he remembered it. That was the first time Rob admitted he felt genuine fear. Rob fell silent for a long moment, rubbing his forehead, staring at the floor. Billy realized this was no longer ordinary stress. It was the exhaustion of a man who had been fighting for far too long. Billy spoke honestly, telling his friend that his love for his son was admirable, but the situation had crossed into dangerous territory. Boundaries needed to be set, even if it meant pain. Rob listened, his eyes red. Then he said wearily, "I understand what you're saying. I'm worried too. But I can't see my son as a threat." He feared that even the slightest sense of rejection might push Nick over the edge. When Billy left the house after dark, he carried a heaviness he had never felt before, a gut feeling That something terrible was slowly, silently forming inside that home. Only later, when Billy's memories were revealed, did people begin to see everything in a different light. The warning signs had been there all along, clear, unmistakable, yet overlooked. When the tragedy occurred, Billy's first reaction was disbelief. What haunted him most was the prolonged silence inside the house, and the fact that Nick was not present when everything was discovered. When Nick Reiner was charged in connection with his parents' deaths, and images of him appearing in court in a prison uniform spread across the media, Billy Crystal was utterly devastated. Every warning he had given Rob had become a brutal reality. Nick is currently being held without bail, awaiting his next court hearing in early 2026. For Billy, this was not a random tragedy. It was the heartbreaking outcome of years of accumulated tension, love, exhaustion, and despair. Billy Crystal gradually withdrew from the spotlight. He stopped appearing publicly, stopped giving interviews. His pain was not anger, it was regret. Regret that he hadn't stayed longer. That he had believed love alone would be enough. In the end, Billy found healing not by forgetting, but by remembering. Remembering Rob Reiner, the friend who taught him that stories can heal people, that laughter and love can exist even in the darkest moments. Rob Reiner's legacy is not only found in his timeless films, but in the hearts he touched. And this story reminds us that behind every success, every smile, there is always a fragile heart trying to hold everything together. What about you? Do you think this tragedy could have been prevented? Or had it been quietly slipping toward disaster for far too long? After everything, what haunts Billy Crystal most is not the moment the tragedy occurred, but the signs that had appeared long before it. Half-finished confessions, tired eyes, unusual silences in a house once full of laughter. All of it was there, clearer than any investigative clue, yet obscured by love, hope, and the belief that everything would somehow be okay. The Reiner family's tragedy is not just a story about fame, money, or glamorous Hollywood. It is a mirror reflecting millions of other families, where love is forced to confront invisible demons called addiction, despair, and emotional exhaustion. Rob Reiner was not an indifferent father. On the contrary, he loved his son enough to carry every risk himself, believing love could save everything. But sometimes, love has limits. For Billy Crystal, this pain will never completely disappear. It will only settle, making room for memory and gratitude, for a rare friendship that lasted nearly half a century. Rob Reiner did not leave this world forgotten. He lives on in every frame of film, every burst of laughter from audiences, and in the hearts of those he touched with kindness and sincerity. This story does not end to condemn, but to remind us that behind the stage lights, behind seemingly perfect families, there are silent, relentless battles. And sometimes, the most terrifying part is not the final explosion, but the long stretch of time before it, when everything slowly slips out of control, and no one is strong enough to stop it. What do you think? Was this an unavoidable tragedy, or the result of warnings ignored for too long? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story made you reflect, don't forget to subscribe so we can continue exploring the hidden sides behind shocking tragedies together. And perhaps the most heartbreaking truth in all of this is that no one was entirely evil. There was no outside villain who came to destroy a family. No cold, calculated conspiracy from the start. Only people who loved one another, slowly dragged down by psychological fractures that time and pressure kept widening. Rob Reiner spent his life telling stories about hope, understanding, and people overcoming differences to find each other. Ironically, in his own life, he became trapped in a story with no perfect script, where every choice carried fear and regret. As a father, he was afraid to let go. As a husband, he wanted to protect his family. And in trying to hold everything together, he may have stood too close to the edge. Michelle Reiner, the woman who stood beside Rob with gentleness and patience, also became part of this tragedy. She may not have been the star on screen, but in real life she was the quiet pillar, absorbing tensions and sleepless nights few ever saw. Her passing made the pain even harder to name. And Nick, at the center of the conflict, is a familiar image to many struggling with addiction. Not a monster, and not simply a victim. A lost human being, carrying both overwhelming love and unfillable emptiness. And when everything crossed the line, the consequences were irreversible. Time will pass. Case files will close. Breaking news will be replaced by news stories. But for those left behind, especially Billy Crystal, the what-ifs will echo for a long time. What if he had stayed longer that day? What if Rob had been firmer? What if someone had intervened earlier? These questions have no answers, yet they become inseparable from memory. In the end, what remains is the bitter lesson this story leaves behind, that love, no matter how great, needs boundaries, that silence can be more dangerous than arguments, and that mental battles, when ignored, can destroy even the strongest families. Rob Reiner spent his life making the world laugh and cry through his films. But his final story was not a movie, it was a painful reminder of human fragility. A story without a happy ending, but one that must be told, so similar tragedies might be seen sooner, taken more seriously, and perhaps, just perhaps, prevented in time. If you stayed with us to these final lines, take a moment to think about the people beside you. Sometimes, a single honest conversation, a clear boundary, or a cry for help heard at the right moment, can change an entire fate. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next one. See you in the next video.